Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're broadcasting live from, I'm in the middle of nowhere in the Ashley National Forest in Utah. And Harry, you're in suburban Boston, right?
Yes.
So thank you all for joining today. I will start out by saying that many of you are aware that we call these fireside chats, interviews, whatever you want to call them, the Luminary series, and that is all Harry's fault. He said, he kicked me in the head over the phone about a year ago and said, why don't you just do some interviews and call them the Luminary series? Because that's what I did and it worked. And so all this is his fault. That's a true story, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm super grateful to have Harry with us today. I guess it was about 2 or 3 years ago, aside from the textbook that he wrote a book called Moneyball Medicine, and it was in the throes of Obamacare and what was, I guess is properly called performance medicine. What do they call it? Based
Outcome-based medicine.
Outcome-based medicine. And so super interesting stuff. And today we're here to talk about not only the evolution of how Harry has got to where he is, but his new book. And so I think you're all going to enjoy it because there's lots of things that relate to all of us. So for the record, we're recording this. So if you find something interesting you'd like to review, you can see it again on the Family Office Insights YouTube channel. And then if there's others that you think might be interested, you're welcome to send them there, or we're going to put you in touch directly with Harry. And of course, you can find the book on Amazon or Harry's website, which we'll make sure that you have as well. So super grateful to have you again, Harry. And he has, by the way, has a very, very popular in the top 1% podcast, right?
Yes.
So you guys, he's rivaling Joe Rogan. And so you're welcome to subscribe to that as well. So we can't hear or see you, but we know you're there. And so please feel free to post your questions in the chat or the Q&A as they come to mind, and we'll get to as many as possible. So Harry, welcome. Take it away. Thank you for being here. If you could just start with the evolution of how all this happened, that would be great.
No, thank you very much for having me. Great to be here. So I'll give you a little of my background. So I started out in pathology, which is the study of dead tissue, a long time ago. And in one of the areas that was actually, called precision medicine, where you could actually understand what was happening at a molecular level to be able to determine what treatment was best for that woman. And then I had my own lab and sold it. And then I ended up working at Applied Biosystems, which was the company that did the human genome, which was super exciting. Still probably one of the funnest times of my career. And then I left there and I started a strategy consulting firm, which I grew to about 40 people and sold to a private equity fund. And then since then, I've been starting new companies and spinning them up, and am a general partner at a venture fund now, or have been for about the past 4 years. And in the meantime, as Arthur pointed out, I've written a few books and have a podcast. And I guess the difference between Joe Rogan and me is, well, besides the fact he's much more popular, but we tend to tell the truth and the facts as opposed to like making them up as we go along. But that's how Harry ended up where he is now, a short story.
So Harry and I met subsequent to me meeting one of his partners in the venture fund, who I met, Rory Riggs and his wife out in the Hamptons like 10 years ago, or 7 years ago, friends. And then we met. And then I said, so how are you structuring this venture fund? And he said, well, I'm got my friend Rory Riggs. And I said, Royalty Pharma? So talk about how you structured the fund and how different it is.
Yeah, so Fund 3, what we did was, and we've done this in Fund 1 and Fund 2 and in Fund 3, was we had access to an asset called Royalty Pharma, which is the largest royalty pharmaceutical fund in the world. which has historically had, 20-25% growth year on year. And we had access to invest in it, and we vowed that we would put 30-35% into Royalty Pharma, which we had access to, and then the rest of the fund was traditional venture in the life sciences and healthcare area. I'm very happy to say that when Royalty Pharma went public last year, we all did well. And as of now, we have returned all of Royalty Pharma to the existing investor base and returned all their capital plus growth in year 4. And we have 14 other companies in the portfolio that we're nurturing along towards hopefully, safe exits.
So as an LP in the fund, and these are my words, not yours, you had a stable value component where you knew that 30% was going to click away at a meaningful rate of return, which would allow you the breathing room to invest in companies that could perform as venture. And so you had the two components. And so I found that super interesting, and you demonstrated that your thesis worked. So, and by the way, Harry presented to the community at the throes of the first fund. And so if you were a Family Office Insights member, this is my commercial, you were able to see that and participate. And if you weren't, you didn't. So how about that? Take it away, Harry.
I can share my screen and talk about.
Let's take it.
So I'll give you guys sort of an overview of I think I will try to frame it in two ways. One is, the book and what it covers, but in reality, what's buried in that book is sort of how people can take charge of their own healthcare in some way. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't interact with your doctor. I highly recommend that, but giving you sort of technology insights and data that would help you manage your health and wellness, or the health and wellness of your loved one, better. And being a venture investor, these are the areas that I see are going to be the next, huge areas of investing in the world that will rival the technology sector, in my humble opinion, because they combine both technology and biology together. And so I tried to cover across the book a number of different areas of healthcare and life sciences. The book is written in the most accessible language that I could write it in. So if anybody should be able to read this book. Maybe it could be done in about 2 hours. And it should give you a really good understanding of what's happening in the healthcare and life sciences world today, and how it is actionable for you as an individual. If you think about it, what we've got is sort of the fourth industrial revolution, which is technology that we term as AI, or artificial intelligence, that spans the whole gamut of, cradle to grave and, discovering drugs, et cetera. Now, when I explain things like artificial intelligence, the way that I would frame it to everybody is you're using it every day and you just may not realize it. So every time you interact with Siri or Alexa, you're interacting with a artificial intelligence platform. Whenever you're searching Netflix, you're interacting with a artificial intelligence platform. And so every day in your interaction, I'd be shocked if somebody wasn't interacting with some form of AI and just not realize that it's happening, which is great because you want it in the background, doing what it's doing and making life easier or give you better outcomes that you're looking for rather than be intrusive. And so we can do things like early onset of disease opportunities. One example I'll give you that I'll talk about a little bit later is, there are blood tests available now where we can scan the DNA in your blood looking for tumor fragments that would be able to tell you whether the treatment that you're having is working or not. And a company like that would be called Guardant, and I believe they just made a big announcement today with the White House that I saw pop up, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But eventually what we're going to be able to do is, instead of looking at it as you're being treated, we'll probably be able to migrate it to do early detection. And so my idea, and I wrote this paper like 6 years ago, was that everybody's going to go in for a simple blood test. We're going to scan your blood for tumor-based DNA and potentially identify something before it becomes a problem, and then be able to deal with it.
Is this something, Harry, that you just mentioned, the company Garnet, that the medical practitioners are aware of as it happens, or do they have to wait like everybody else for the sales guy to come around and say, hey, have you done this, and this is how you do it?
I think it depends on the practitioner. I mean, there are some that are in tune with what's going on, and then many of them are just, it's not that they don't want to know. I think they're just
Too much information.
Yeah, they're so busy doing what they're doing that they're not aware of it, right? And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of availability of things today that, the average practitioner just doesn't know about.
Yeah.
So, and when you think about this whole area of what health and wellness, I mean, if you remember before, or not that long ago, like the only place you could go was the ivory tower, right? Now that it's become digitized and is becoming more and more digitized daily, you're seeing other players come into the space. And so you've got Amazon, you've got Apple, and I will tell you, I have serious bets on all of these companies because I think they're going to make a huge difference in the health and wellness space and monetize it in ways that are very different than the existing healthcare market. So yesterday, I was actually interviewing the head of data sciences at a company called Whoop, which is this band I'm wearing on my arm here. This thing pulls in 50 to 100 megabytes of data per day per user. Now, that is unbelievable amount of data that's being pulled in. The analysis you can do on that is unreal. She was telling me about some of the studies that they're doing, and where you could look at how menstruation affects exercise, and they have 300,000 people in the study. Now, in my world of healthcare, 300,000 people, we can't get 300,000 people. It's just impossible. So it really removes that whole statistical analysis, because you have such a big population that you're really pretty certain of what you're seeing.
So the data set's large enough to be credible.
Oh, hugely credible. They can do things that people on the research side could only in their wildest dreams, think about. I mean, she was talking about when she was a researcher, if they got 14 people for a sleep study, that was a big number.
Yeah.
Right. So now you're going from 14 to 300,000. Unbelievable data sets.
What am I missing here? I'm sorry, Harry, because my mind immediately goes to, okay, you're paying Whoop to wear their band, and they're monetizing your data.
They're not monetizing it. They're doing the research study that then they publish, which then you can incorporate into your life about how you do what you do.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the big insights from this study, which I'd like to see the final study, but what she was saying was women change their whole exercise profile based on the data that come out of this to actually get more out of their exercise than they would have without this information. So based on menstruation cycle, right? So there's some really interesting stuff that's happening in the space by these companies. I mean, the Deep Minds from Google produced a program called AlphaFold. It's incredible at predicting the folding of a protein, which when we're making drugs, that's incredibly helpful for us when we're working on these drugs. This is the best program that's out on the market by far, which should speed up drug discovery and development. So when talking about the space of the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence and its subcomponents are going to revolutionize everything we know And I'm not talking about, some sentient being or, Commander Data from Star Trek. It just needs to do something narrow and do it incredibly well. Like look at an X-ray image and identify an issue that it can point out to a physician in seconds. Or Google has a system where you look into it, it takes a image of your eye and can diagnose 50 different diseases in seconds, right? It doesn't have to do everything. It just has to do one or two things incredibly well, repetitively, and fast. And that can change the way that you do a whole process. If you think about the health and wellness area, as I was describing, all of these technologies really give you insight into your behaviors and how to sort of optimize your life so that you get more out of it. I do a lot with my Whoop band or my Apple Watch where it helps me optimize my sleep better. If my sleep is better, I have more energy during the next day and I perform better. I'm cognitively more on top of things. The biggest area lately has been stress, right? Because of COVID. There's a number of different apps out there now that really sort of help you collect yourself and de-stress in a lot of ways. My bed, I've got an 8 sleep bed, and it actually will change the temperature of the bed based on what level of sleep I'm in. If I'm in deep sleep, it cools it off, which keeps me there longer. And as I'm waking up, it warms up, right? So trust me, in the cold winter in Boston, having the bed automatically change the temperature is awesome, right? So it's there to help you optimize your sleep. So you can imagine one day that the thermostat is going to talk to the bed, right? That's going to talk to your phone that of all the information that's on your wearable, and they're all going to coordinate so that you get a better night's sleep. And that's all artificial intelligence driven. Or VR. I was talking to the head of HTC about their VR system and how it's actually able to help people post-stroke do their exercises, because they can put the VR glass on and it says, fill the balloon with air, and they're sort of tilted over, and by moving, they fill the balloon with air. And as they get stronger, they're able to sort of stand upright better rather than what they were in a stroke mode. And they come out of it, they're like, hell, I just did I'm having fun. And, I'm helping myself. And by the way, the machine can actually measure the range of motion better than a human can, and measure it accurately to be able to tell how much progress someone is making. And then you've got these technologies, which I will categorize as what's called a digital therapeutic. So when you think about a therapeutic, you think about something that, like Tylenol, that you ingest, you drink it down and it has an effect. Well, we now have digital products that are equivalent to taking a pill and having the same outcome as that therapeutic without any of the side effects. So let me give you an example. What if you had a child or an adult, but this is actually cleared for children, a child with ADHD. Do you want to give them Ritalin or Adderall, which has a lot of side effects, and hop from one to the other because you are not sure which one is going to work right? Or would you like to prescribe them a video game that they can play that will help them equivalent to Adderall or Ritalin without any of the side effects? Well, that product is FDA approved. It's from a company called Achille. And you can get prescribed that video game, and it's reimbursed by the medical system, and the child can play that game, and it will help them with their ADHD. And so I did a really extensive interview of this, of the CEO on my podcast, but I've known the company since it started. And then there's companies like Propeller Health, which is the one right in the middle of the slide. Imagine that all it is an inhaler with a GPS chip in the bottom. Well, my phone knows where I am. So if I'm in a smoggy area, the phone might pop up and say, Harry, before you go out, you might want to take a puff of your inhaler so that the smog doesn't exacerbate your asthma. And what we saw in a very large study was everybody that used this product, the number of ER visits plummeted. So the insurance companies are happy and the patient is happy. So there's a number of different technologies now that are completely changing the game on how a patient can manage themselves, and or a physician can prescribe for them to be treated that may not have the negative outcomes that a drug may have. And all driven by artificial intelligence. You have areas like telehealth where we can go, anybody can be helped anywhere. And earlier this year, Samsung announced that in their TV, one of their new TVs, you'll be able to subscribe to their telehealth platform. So you can imagine, I might have a blood pressure cuff at home and a small ECG monitor at home and a weight scale. And now the physician remotely has all my vitals and I don't have to be in the office, right? Or I can go to the CVS or Walgreens down the street and they have these devices and can perform a whole physical or a battery of tests that you can do right there. And if a problem shows up, they'll say, hey, Harry, can you step over here? The physician will see you through our telehealth platform and you can get direct help from that physician. Or robotic surgery. What if you could go in and the robot is the one performing the surgery directly on you and your physician is the best surgeon, but they're across the country actually doing the surgery. Now, you just don't want the internet connection to go down. That would be very bad. But other than that, you can imagine that this is changing the way that we are taking medicine forward. Then you've got areas like I mentioned, the technology when I first started, something called liquid biopsy, where I can take a vial of blood and interrogate that blood for DNA that I'm looking for that may come from a tumor. And basically I can understand how the therapy I'm giving you may be working on you. So in the old days, we'd wait to see if the tumor grew back. Well, why do I need to wait until the tumor's back? With this technology, I can sort of check in as it's going and tell you whether things are headed in a positive or negative direction. And if it's negative, I can make a course correction.
So Harry, people
Yes.
must be thinking, as I am right now, especially with that particular subject, because of how dramatized it was as a failure, and also on the miniseries about Theranos. So this actually, she was onto something. She just couldn't be trusted, right? But this stuff actually exists, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, huge clinical trials, very well done studies, right? So what I would tell you about Theranos is anybody that invested in Theranos, I don't even know how they thought about their due diligence, because they didn't do it. If they just called someone like me up, I would have been like, not going to work.
Yeah,
Right? Technologically, not going to work, right? This technology, it's a whole vial of blood. There's a special processing. There's high-end computing to do the analytics and the sequencing. It's a completely different process, right? It's not one drop of blood and we're going to do, work magic. Yeah. Completely different approach, but it works and it's moving at incredible speeds. Pharmacogenomics, where you would actually look at your own DNA to understand how drugs you are taking or may take, how your body processes them, right? So, I mean, I know for a particular drug, if they ever gave it to me, I metabolize it very slowly. So I wouldn't take the same dose that they would give to anybody else, right? And then this whole area of prenatal testing. So I've got stories in the book about, people that this has happened to, but I can tell you, one woman had gone in, given birth, baby boy. They walked into the room. They were doing a study. They said, would you be okay if we sequenced your child? And we'll come back to you with the results. Sure. She just had a baby, right? Ready to go. They come back and they're like, the baby boy was BRCA positive. Doesn't affect.
What's that mean?
So BRCA is a strong indicator of potentially getting breast cancer. So it does not affect.
As a boy?
Well, does not affect the boy necessarily.
Yeah.
But will affect the mother potentially. So what happened was they had all the women in the family tested.
Yeah.
And she was BRCA positive. And so, trying to figure all that out. And I asked her, I'm like, do you regret, having the baby tested? She goes, no. She goes, that information empowered me to be able to manage this. And so rather than it come crashing down on my head, I can get ahead of it. So there's a lot of activity going on in this area that's really going to change health and wellness as we go forward. I mean, I would be shocked if in the next 5 to 10 years, this was just not standard practice, because it's becoming so inexpensive and easy and accurate to do this. And then we've got areas like CRISPRs. If you haven't heard of this technology, this is a Nobel Prize winning technology. I'll frame it like this. If you remember the old typewriters, and one of these days I got to stop saying this because somebody's not going to know what the old typewriter is. But when you'd make a mistake, you'd go back and with a correction tape, you'd fix that one letter that you'd make a mistake in. So imagine being able to do that at the DNA level, is going in and fixing the one letter that's wrong. And that one letter causes you're either diseased or not diseased. And so the perfect example is sickle cell anemia. We've never had an efficient treatment for sickle cell. It's a single base mutation. In other words, one letter is wrong. And so now it's about 1.5 years ago, the first patient was treated with a gene CRISPR-based therapy to fix that letter. And she has been disease-free ever since. And so there are a number of diseases that are single letter mistakes that this technology will allow us to go in and make that change. Now, you can imagine, what I can tell you is anything on the planet that has DNA is up for, being manipulated by this technology.
Yeah.
And when I mean anything, it's fish, cattle, crops, or even materials that you would manufacture. In other words, what if I could tell a yeast cell to produce a raw material that I'm going to use in a manufacturing process? All of this is happening today. Actually, none of the things I'm telling you are future state. They're all present state.
So can we talk about that for a minute? So in layman's terms, you're going and fixing the code
Correct.
rather than treating the symptoms.
Correct.
And when you say CRISPR treatment, how does that actually work? Is it a chemical that they ingest that ends up recoding automatically? Because that's super fascinating. So I know I probably screwed that all up, but how does it work?
So, it depends, I think, of what you're treating, but some of them, maybe we may take certain cells out.
Yeah.
Basically introduce the CRISPR, which makes the change, and then reintroduce the cells. Or there's one for blindness now, where it's directly injected into the eye. This is a genetic hereditary blindness.
Yeah.
And they'll start with one eye. And, with the first child they did it with, very quickly, that child got his eyesight back in one, and then they do the other.
This
right?
just sounds like science fiction.
No, we're really good. We're moving fast. We're people don't fully appreciate how fast we're moving, because the data and some of these technologies are making a profound difference. It's becoming I don't want to say digitized, but I can't think of a better word on how quickly we're able to move. I mean, I'll talk about COVID in a second, but when we sequenced SARS the first time, it took us 3 months, and we knew what we were doing. And we had a whole lab that could do it. We did COVID in 48 hours, and they did it with a benchtop instrument. I mean, we're at a whole other level of what we can do these days, just compared to 5 years ago. And it's moving at order of magnitude every year. Because remember, the technology sector isn't slowing down, and they're giving us the chips that are an order of magnitude faster. So we can do what we do an order of magnitude faster. We can do things that we might have not have, I mean, in some ways, you couldn't do what we're doing 5 years ago. I mean, let me go back and just say something as simple as this blood pressure cuff. You go back, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, you had to go to the nurse. They had to put it on your arm. They had to take the stethoscope, listen in, time it. I put this thing on my arm, I push a button, out comes the blood pressure.
Wow.
Right?
So I know others are thinking about this too, Harry. Forgive me for one moment. Do I discover these things through my concierge doctor? Or, how do I, if I have a blind child, what am I doing? Right? Who do I go to?
Oh, I mean, the answer to every question might be a little bit different. I mean,
Sure. Yeah.
that's why I wrote this book, is so that people could sort of at least, understand where the state of everything is.
Yeah.
There are great podcasts to listen to that can sort of bring people up to speed, but I think it depends on what you're dealing with. So I was just talking to a woman where their whole foundation is working on rare diseases. Like if your child has a rare disease, you got to find the right people that can understand how to diagnose that child in some reasonable amount of time so that you understand how to manage that. If you have an oncology issue, I would tell you that anybody who has, some form of cancer, I would almost say you must be sequenced. If you're not being sequenced, and I know that there are some great doctors out there, and the statistics sort of like back up what they're doing, and we've gotten very good at it. I'm just a stickler for, there's a Google map. If you have a Google map, it'll show you what's there. And it might show you that there's a therapy that would work better than what's being potentially just the educated, experienced guess.
And being sequenced is accessible and not expensive, right?
It's accessible. Expensive is a relative term. 3 to say 10 grand in total. That includes the sequencing and the interpretation. The interpretation is still expensive.
Yeah.
Right. But hell, I would rather have that information than not have that information.
Totally.
Right. So, and there are areas like Regina Barzilay down at MIT has been working on a image analysis system for breast cancer, which can actually see a tumor forming 5 years before a human would recognize that it's there. So the machine can see subtle changes that the human eye will not or may not see. So if you see it, you can be like, all right, well, let's watch this. At least you know what you're looking for, right? I mean, I think anybody would want to know 5 years before it becomes a problem.
Totally.
And then how they can, take care of it. There are FDA-approved products for diabetic retinopathy. You just look in the system, takes an image of your eye, seconds later, you're diagnosed, right? Or systems that can actually help early detections of dementia, where the machine actually makes all the measurements of the scan of your brain, and it can notice the smallest difference that a human doing all the measurements by hand may miss, right? So all of these technologies are today and coming to market, right? Very quickly. I mean, now it seems like every week or two, I'm hearing about a new FDA cleared artificial intelligence, platform product that really makes the management and diagnosis better and faster. I mean, there was one that got approved in December for prostate cancer. So the machine plus the human pathologist ranked much better than either the machine or the pathologist by themselves, right? And the machine doesn't get tired. The machine did not have an argument with their spouse.
Right.
Okay, it's very objective and it does what it's supposed to do, and it does it over and over again. And oh, by the way, the more data we feed it, the better it gets.
Yeah.
Right.
And the analyst or physician or whoever's reading it may not have an 8-bed like you and didn't sleep that well, right?
There's all sorts of, and nobody, I think everybody goes out and does the best job they can do every day. That's what you got to sort of go forward with. But
yeah, of course.
I think we're getting to the point where if the institution isn't implementing some of these things, you got to question whether you want to go to that institution or not, right? And you look at drug discovery. I mean, some of the companies I'm talking to and looking at investing in have basically cut out the first 3 years of work because the analytics are so efficient and so fast that I don't need to waste all that time that I used to waste before, right? And so imagine that I can cut out 3 years here, cut out a little time in the beginning and then cut out some time on the end. Okay, instead of taking 10 years, maybe now the drug is done in 4 or 5, right? That is a huge step change in speed, but also reduces the risk from an investment perspective, right?
Yeah, because the timeline is so long. Can we take a couple quick questions? Can we take a couple quick questions?
You can take whatever you like.
Great. I can't tell whether this is a question or statement. You edit a gene in the stem cells of a patient's red blood cells.
Yes, this is Dr. Campbell, so I'm sure that he's accurately portraying a particular treatment for sickle cell.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah.
So it's good. This is live.
There it is. Sickle cell.
We're chatting without chatting. The AI prostate cancer test is from Paige AI, Paige. And I believe they're working or just got another one approved. So that's the other thing about these technologies.
Yeah.
Once you get it going and you get the FDA comfortable with what you're doing, you may be able to start adding on other cancers. I got spun out of MSK. It's up here in Boston now. They just got a new CEO because I actually interviewed the former CEO on my podcast. So
you see the other question there? Would you please share what is the Pathology AI test for prostate cancer?
Yeah, that was Paige AI.
That was it. Okay, that was also it. Thank you, David.
Now,
and Saab, if you have a question, I know you raised your hand, just type it in the chat box.
So, imagine the other thing of, what if I could start doing clinical trials without the patient having to come in all the time? Well, with all of these devices, I'm totally wired up. They can monitor me any which way they want. Can I do clinical trials faster with better data? Well, I don't have enough patients for this clinical trial. I'm have 80 of them and I need another 20. What if I can actually create a digital twin? Just like they do in engines and other things that the FDA will accept as the 20 more patients that I can introduce into this trial so I can actually do the trial. Well, the FDA has agreed to take digital twins, and there are a number of companies that are building these digital twins for clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies. So, these technologies are not, fantasies or in the future or whatever. They're today that are happening right now, so they can make a difference in people's lives. They also, I look at them and say, there's some, really good investment opportunities, or both. I talked a little bit about the pandemic. If you think about what we did, and like somebody like me, of course, geeks out about it because I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we did that, right? Because I know how much work it took to bake that cake, in the normal way, and the way that we bake. This is like presto, right? Sort of capability. So imagine we sequence in 48 hours. So that's done. That becomes available to the world. All of a sudden, there's a number of companies that come up with their first target that they want to take into testing 48 hours later. So 4 days we went from sequence to here's the first treatments that I need to start testing. Then they took the whole process and they stacked it parallelly on top of each other instead of doing it serially like we historically do. And I will admit, they took some big chances by building manufacturing, and the government invested. If this stuff worked, everything was going to be ready right at the end at the same time. Very unusual. Usually we do things one after the other, right? And so in 9 months, we went from starting to get the sequence to having a vaccine available. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. That is earth-shattering. I don't know if hopefully the next one we can do it even faster now that we've had a trial run, but this is amazing. And so if we start looking at, if the FDA is willing to incorporate some of these learnings into the old process, we might see a number of drugs actually move through the system faster and more efficiently.
So do you want to try one more question?
I will happily do whatever you like.
How do you see the big data AI using continuous monitoring, building the future of preventive medicine?
I'm trying to open. Oh, how do you see the big data AI continuous monitoring? Oh, absolutely. So I was saying this earlier. I was interviewing the head of data sciences for Whoop, which is this band I'm using on my arm. And we were talking about, like, you can see things happening before somebody realizes they're happening. I mean, they published a paper showing they could actually see the respiratory rate of the individual change before COVID symptoms could be felt. So when they let the population of users know this, there were people that actually were monitoring and could see their respiratory change, decided like not to go home for Thanksgiving. And then they tested positive for COVID. So you can imagine that had you not had that information and gone and infected grandma, like that would not be a good outcome, right? You would not be happy with yourself.
Yeah.
So these technologies can give you insights. I've interviewed a number of people on my podcast where we've talked about how they've utilized these technologies, actually seeing a disease state before it happens. And I have to imagine that, many of these technologies are early warning technologies. In other words, you have a dashboard when you drive your car and all these indicators. You really wouldn't drive your car without some of them, right?
Yeah.
We drive this thing every day and we have no indication of how it's working. We just take it for granted. Well, these technologies that I'm talking about give you at least some insight into what's happening. And I can tell you that with the number of people that are using this, the insights we're getting are actually quite profound. So I can imagine that these systems will be early warning signs to something being off, that if you know early enough, you can course correct, right? So this is a well-known device. It's a blood pressure monitor. I mean, if I notice my blood pressure going off, hey, I have choices. I can keep going down the track I'm going, or I can keep gaining weight and I know it's just going to get worse. But now I've got the information and I can make the choice. If I don't have the information, whatever, it is what it is. So I think these technologies will have a profound impact on health and wellness and managing yourself early.
So talk, I know you want to get to the stuff you want to get to, but one of the things we all benefit from people we know and trust is their primary research and their experience. So I asked you before the call about your Ring, your watch, your Whoop. Talk about what you like or don't like about those. Not to disparage any one of them, but from somebody who's like dialed into all this.
Yeah, so I mean, people, my friends look at me, they're like, is there anything else you're going to start
Yeah,
wearing?
right. Yeah.
I'm like, well, listen, if you're writing about this, talking about it and investing, and you're not playing with it,
Yeah.
sort of tough to be clued in of what's going on, right? The difference is, I think I explained. I look at the Whoop band as a coach for working out. It really gives me some insight into how much I should be working out. Should I push my workout? And it actually encourages me to go that extra mile every once in a while. The Apple Watch acts more like a data aggregation device that I can utilize with apps on my phone, like my sleep app. I use this the most. But I actually look at all of them and I correlate all of them to see how they're all, reporting the results. And I can tell when someone has updated their algorithm, because all of a sudden the numbers will start to change. Right? And the ones I like the most is I use auto sleep with my Apple Watch, which you can download onto your phone. And then I use this as a coach. As much as I like the form factor of the Ring, this one hasn't been as insightful yet. Now they're about to do an update, so I may change my mind based on the updates. That's the other thing about this area. Software update, everything
Instant to everybody, yeah.
Right? It can change for the better.
Yeah.
So these technologies have profound upgradability and can have a profound impact on the person that's using it. I mean, I know people that have the Aura watch, and the husband and wife will compete about who got a better score, right?
You said Aura watch, it's Aura Ring, right?
Or a Ring, right? Yeah. So, I mean, if there's competition and that helps them be healthier, great. I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, that's super helpful. Thanks for doing that. Yeah.
So I already talked about the pandemic and what's going on there, but this was just phenomenal work by everybody involved. And I mean, the number of people that were involved is insane. People, the average person just doesn't realize the yeoman's job that got done here. Everybody always asks about, are you worried about privacy? I'm always worried about privacy. I would say that compared to what people actually put on the web themselves, there ain't a whole lot to worry about, especially the younger generation. That said, we should always look at where we're putting our data, making sure that the privacy policies are what we'd like them to be. I do believe that the AI platforms, everybody understands that we need to be able to explain them. And so all the big tech companies understand that. So they're building systems that we're going to start using that are more explainable. We always have to worry about bias, but I really wouldn't want to use anything that's not FDA cleared, right? Because the FDA should be holding people to the standard of having a broad enough population that, it works effectively in all populations. So I look at the bright side of this and not the negative. Like, there may be a problem today, but we're working hard to fix it. And with the rate of change of the technology, I think that, within a couple of years, we will get beyond this. But essentially, to sort of, tap this off, is there are a number of different ways you can manage yourself. Everything from the health and wellness tracker to, where you can do your own, like I said, I mean, this device is $80. It'll do a 6-parameter view of your heart, right? And an AI system can look at the trace and identify if there's a problem and you can email it to your doctor, right?
That's
So
crazy. It's basically an EKG from Amazon, right?
no, well, yeah, it's a company called AliveCore, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, this is getting better and better all the time. They're improving the software all the time and getting it FDA cleared, by the way. So it's definitely not a toy. I mean, it's a medical device. And, you know, it's just an image. So the AI system is very good at interrogating the image and noting aberrations, right? And now I can have something that's longitudinal over time. It's not that one time I went to the doctor, right? So a friend of mine, I just saw him recently, he said, you know, I have AFib. And, you know, I called my doctor and I said, I'm in AFib right now. So they literally took the data from the Whoop band and interrogated, like, when did he start in AFib? How long did it last?
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Yeah.
You could see that from this wearable, which, by the way, is not FDA cleared. It is a health and wellness device, right? Or now you can get a continuous glucose monitor. The number of people in the country that are pre-diabetic that don't know it is large. So what if I could just have this thing on my arm, which, by the way, I've worn the 2 that are available now, and wave this over my wand after every meal, and it'll tell me exactly how I'm reacting to that food. And by the way, once I've worn it for 2-week periods, the AI has learned enough about my diet that I can actually plug in what I'm about to eat, and it will tell me what's
going to happen.
What my levels would look like, right?
That's incredible.
So now they just actually released there's a new one coming where the battery, instead of lasting 2 weeks, lasts 6 months. So why wouldn't everybody sort of want to know how different foods affect them? I mean, there are certain foods that spike me and keep me up, which all it's doing is zapping my energy. I want to stay away from food like that because I don't want to be tired, right? Or I want to substitute it for something else. But without that information, I'm never going to be able to make that. You know, my wife always says, well, you need to know your body. I'm like, listen, give me the data so that I can make an objective decision and I can move forward faster. And areas like telemedicine. I mean, I think that's going to have a profound impact on people when they can't go to the physician, or they want to see the physician more often, or they live in a rural community, right?
Or who wants to sit in a doctor's office unnecessarily, or a hospital? No, thank you, right?
I mean, all of this is available today. That's all I got. If there are more questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
So this has been super helpful. We're going to run out of time here, so just to be mindful, but I think that was awesome, Harry. Thank you. I think that for the most part, people are looking for information they can count on, as opposed to people whose agenda is not clear and they have no credible history of doing this. And I don't need to be nice to you for any reason, but you know, we've enjoyed knowing each other for quite a long period of time, and I think that I'm super grateful because the community can review this and look at it, read your book, and know that you've got authentic interest in giving credible information, as opposed to, you know, for the record, everybody, you couldn't even get into Harry's fund if you wanted to after a bit, just because there was so much demand. So it's not like he's sit here trying to, you know, promote what he's doing. So, which is nothing wrong with that, but just so you know, super credible stuff. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great to see you.
Yeah. So we're going to publish this. We'll put everybody in touch with Harry. I will say, though, if you're trying to promote your product to him, you know, just don't. His plate's pretty full, and that's not the idea of this. But meanwhile, thank you for your nice words in the chat box, and thank you again for being with us, Harry, here, and to all the attendees. And as I always say, thank you for sharing with us the only thing you can't make more of, and that's your time, which is what Harry's trying to give us more of. So thank you. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Take
Okay.
care. Bye.
Bye-bye.